Deformation's on my team.
Welcome back to the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike. Happy Friday, everybody. I hope everybody's having a great start to the weekend today. And today I want to talk to you about Deformation Space and how they are done for. I got official word pretty recently that Deformation Space is no longer, but there's products still lingering out of the market, just like this Starscream is on clearance. We've heard about the clearances, we've heard that there were problems or issues or whatever, but officially now, Deformation Space is done. So that got me thinking, the first thing I thought was, what about the Coneheads? Because I expected to get the Coneheads in this style and scale from Deformation Space because they are my favorite. And what's up with Coneheads? So I'm going to go ahead and talk today about the ramifications of Deformation Space not going further with any more of these Seekers if they choose not to, or if they can't. Now I'm going to talk about the other options on the market and a little bit more optimism towards the end, and more coming up. So who is Deformation Space? Well, in the beginning, when they first came out, I said they have the transform element aesthetic. So I really kind of thought they were transform element. And then Black Mamba is associated with this. They're all sort of associated with Black Mamba. Black Mamba got in a lot of trouble for them knocking off a whole bunch of stuff. And when you knock off stuff, you get in trouble. And even your products that you design yourself are in jeopardy. But this Optimus Prime came out of nowhere, and there was this one, Magic Square and Takara, within a year of each other. Now, I thought that they would have gotten in trouble back then, Transform Element, and I guess evidently they did eventually get in trouble, but this was the underdog. I thought that their Prime would lose the Prime Wars, but it did very well. It actually is a very nice Optimus Prime. It feels quality, feels quite hefty, and a lot of paint to it. So it's a good option. You really can't go wrong on any of those three Prime options. Transform Element also came out with the Mirage. So there's two very G1-esque, very good aesthetic, excellent in both modes. So they did a pretty good job with these first two releases. Then Transform Element was no longer, right? Transform Element was gone. It's no longer. And we're going to come back to that. We're going to come back to that at the end. So now we've got Deformation Space. Now, I want to say that Deformation Space probably is the most generic Transformer name you can come up with. Deformation is one of the words or terms they use to not say Transformers or transforming. So when you say convert or deformation. So that's kind of where that came from. That was an explanation that was explained to me when I started asking why all of these Transformers, these third-party Transformers that were sold on eBay by Chinese sellers, and they all say deformation in the title. Somewhere in the title, they all say deformation. And it was really strange, but as soon as I saw the title, Deformation Space, I said they're trying to make it sound extra generic. And they were a lower price point, and yes, good-looking figures, great aesthetic, some quality certain issues when it comes to paint. A couple people had some broken parts. I had a misplaced part. Actually had two left parts on one of mine, but hey, it all got fixed in the end. But they're still great looking figures, and overall I haven't broke anything. Nightmare of a Transformation though. Now the question is, will they make Coneheads? Well, there's a couple of things that you have to consider if they make their Coneheads. They would obviously have to redesign that whole portion of the transformation. That would just have to be redesigned a bit, and I personally believe it would make the transformation slightly easier. Now that's not the most challenging or difficult part of the transformation at all, to tell you the truth, but there would have to be some sort of redesign to that aspect of the transformation to put the cone on top of the head, and of course the aesthetic would change for the legs and stuff, but I do like the slender look and the more cartoon aesthetic that they go with. Even though the cartoon, they are kind of bulkier, they're bulkier figures for Coneheads than the standard ones, there still would be a bit of a redesign, but I still think they would be more slender than some of the other options. So if they don't go forward with the design and Takara comes out with their Coneheads, I don't think that the Takara Coneheads would scale well with these. These are bigger figures than Takara. The Deformation Space, if you're in on this design like I am, you're in on this aesthetic like I am, then getting whatever Takara makes in the future, or what Takara's already made, probably won't scale well side by side with this. Now, I personally went with Toy World, and I've got the Toy World Conehead still on my shelf, and I plan on replacing those eventually with Deformation Space if they made them, and I would still do that if they somehow go forward with it, if they change their name or whatever. The Takara Coneheads that already exist are okay, but I would just say that they are okay. I do like the newer design of Takara, and the direction Takara has gone from this old design into the newer what they call 3.0, but it's really a 2.0 design. But they call 2.0, but it's really 3.0. I like the new aesthetic better for Takara in their direction. So obviously their Coneheads would look better than their previous Coneheads. Make Toys has already put out one of their Seekers, and of course they're going to put out more. They've got more planned, and it's been officially, I guess you could say, officially announced that there are more on the way. And so with that, getting more Coneheads from Make Toys and dialing them out, they're still around the Takara scale, but they are a bit taller than Takara. I still think they're on the shorter than the Deformation Space, but they're taller than Takara, so they probably would match your Deformation Space a little bit more. It would probably be a better matchup with the Make Toys next to Deformation Space than what Takara's doing, but it seems like forever for Make Toys to get them out, and there's giant question marks about when, because here we are like 3 years later, still waiting for them to come out. I don't even think they can seem to afford a production run at this point, and a lot of their stuff is turning out to be con exclusives. Now, like I've said, I've got the Toy World ones pretty much because I got them pretty cheap, and I like that they're slender. They're probably too slender, and they are definitely too tall. They're in their own Toy World scale. Toy World did their own thing in their own scale. I was a believer of bigger is better. I got them actually in a trade, so I technically got them for free, but I traded some stuff, but I like them, and I've kept them, and I really haven't gone after other Seekers. I was going to replace them with Make Toys, but then that kind of fell through, and now I don't even know if I want to replace them with the Make Toys anymore. I'm not sure, but if Deformation Space made them, I would definitely replace them with the Deformation Space, but these are still a little bit too tall. As you can see, a couple of them, I've got one on the left-hand side, and I'm cheating because I'm putting Shockwave up higher in the very back. I've got Starscream propped up a little bit to look like he is around the correct size and scale next to the Conehead. And then, of course, I'm blocking my elevation with yet another with Thundercracker right there. So a lot of tricks and cheats I use in my display to try to make things look like they work and try to make the scale look cohesive. I don't know how many people are still rocking eye gear. Eye gear, I think, is the smallest of the bunch and probably the cheapest. Even the original price was the cheapest, but I never really cared for the aesthetic of them, and I never went in on them. But I don't even know how tall they are, to tell you the truth. I've never handled these. I just saw them when they first showed the pictures, and I was like, I didn't really like the way that looked, and so I wasn't excited about it. I know a lot of people that were super stoked about their eye gear, and then alt mode right there, but the eye gear stuff, that's like a thing of the past. It's a relic, but it's always fun to bring up the past, the relic, and see where we came from and where we're going. Next thing I want to talk about is price. Now, obviously, Takara's going to make theirs eventually. I mean, it's not been announced. We don't see pictures or anything, but you can count on it pretty much. And I want to say that when it comes to Takara, the price of $240 or $250 to whatever they're going to charge is a bit high. I would wait for the KO, and I probably will get the Conehead KOs when they come out for myself personally, but I don't feel like they'll scale for my collection. I don't think they'd replace my Toy World, so again, I don't even know if it's really worth the money for me to do that. This is for my collection. Now, if you're in on this scale and you're in on the Takara, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever, because I do think it's a great looking figure. Still feel it's a bit too small for me. So will the Conehead. But the Deformation Space ones were around $130, and in the beginning, the pre-orders were coming up at like $115, but they added in those extra back clips, some took the price like $130, $140 or something like that. But now they're all on fire sale clearance. $85 right now, you can get the Starscream, and so with that, that has it's product of the fact that Deformation Space is going away. Probably no service after the sale. If you have a broken part, I really don't know what you're going to do going forward with that or how you get parts with it. So that there are some issues if you go with Deformation Space right now because of the fact that they are going away. But there's a few things I want to talk about. Now, this is not all negative now. This is a positive because if they're going away and Deformation Space is over and done with and all that kind of stuff, then how come this blaster is still up for pre-order at TF Source? Are they waiting on their shipment that was shipped out 3 months ago or 5 months ago or whatever, and it still hasn't got here yet? That might be true. That might be what's going on with it, but it says pre-order at TF Source right now for this guy. He's also on sale at Show Z, so the remaining stock at Show Z is on sale right now also. But I want to say that I thought it was a pretty good blaster. Overall, the blaster is a pretty good blaster. I kind of took my transistor out. Now I'm displaying this blaster instead of transistor. Now, the matte finish does make it look a little bit less premium, and there's a way to paint the matte paint to look premium. I know that Fans Toys sort of is working on that, I guess, but at the end of the day, a little bit of shine to all my Transformers makes them feel a little bit more premium. So that is my downside to this one, but overall, a pretty good transformation, pretty good figure, pretty solid, great articulation. It's a nice upgrade for a blaster. But the funny thing is when we heard Transform Element was done for and it's gone, but we started getting more Transform Element repaints. And so that's what kind of confuses me on this whole situation, which I still have a little bit of hope for Coneheads. But see, Coneheads require more tooling and some changes to the aesthetic quite different than a repaint. It's not just repaint. Now, maybe Rainmakers could come out, but then if they're done for and it's over, how do they keep putting out more figures and more repaints? How do they get another production run of their Mirage? This thing, and the other thing, this thing is affordable. It's going to hold its own to the good old Fans Toys. But if Deformation Space is done for and they're part of Transform Element, and Transform Element keeps reissuing their stuff, they're not done for. They're not gone anywhere, right? I mean, am I missing something here? But I'm kind of curious what everybody else thinks. If you're in on the Deformation Space, are you wanting them to make Coneheads? Are you expecting them to make Coneheads? Are you expecting, because the mold is out there, someone else to pick it up where it left off, redesign those parts to make it look more like the Conehead characters, and put out further releases down the road under a different name? Could they be the next casualty of the third-party KO? Could somebody knock this off? Could a KO company knock this off and then turn them into Coneheads, which would be fantastic? Or should we just abandon the design because the transformation is quite challenging, to say the least? Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. What is your Conehead preference? Are you even concerned about the Coneheads? Are you going to stick with the first set you got? You got the eye gear, and those are good. Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Happy Friday, everybody. Tadarium Hanger out.
Into us, I can't see!
Stop whining and use your reader!